Hey, what's up guys, it's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for today's video, which is top 10 most anticipated horror movies of 2025. This is my second year putting a video like this together with my most anticipated horror movies of the coming year. But I feel like this time around in this year's video, I've got a pretty good list of movies that I'm genuinely excited about, really curious to check out, and I'm excited waiting for these movies to drop. But as usual, there's a few things to take into regard with today's list. First of all, I don't know every single horror movie coming in 2025. Just because it is the start of the year doesn't mean that I know everything from January to December. As usual, there'll be some movies that sneak up on people and really surprise audiences, but at this point in time, they haven't even been murmured yet. No one knows of their existence, so just keep that in mind. I've tried to stay pretty accurate with the dates. Most of these movies on today's list, we know what month they're dropping. There's still a few movies here where the dates are yet to be announced, but I'm feeling pretty confident, and most people are feeling confident that they're going to drop in 2025. Also take into regard, guys, this is movies that I'm excited about, so if you're not excited about them, that's fine. Let me know some movies that you are excited about in the comments below. And also, guys, if you didn't check out my video at the end of last year talking about pre-recording in January, at the time of this video's drop, I'm actually away, so I am pre-recording this video a few months in advance. I'm actually filming this a couple of months before January, so maybe some of these dates and movies and information could have changed within this time. I just wasn't able to do it, so as I said, this is just pre-recorded, so if some dates and information has changed, just keep that in mind. I was filming this ahead of time, but without delaying any longer, let's get into this top 10 list, my most anticipated horror movies coming in 2025. Coming in at my number 10, I have The Conjuring Last Rites, which is set to be dropped in September. Presumed to be the final installment of the main Conjuring storyline. I'm sure we'll still get plenty more spin-offs because they'll just milk that tank until it's dry and these spin-offs stop making money, but realistically I just don't think these Conjuring spin-offs will ever stop making money. But either way, focusing on the main films following the stories of Ed and Lorraine Warren. The first two movies in the Conjuring trilogy, in my mind, are close to modern masterpieces. They're just really fucking good. The third Conjuring film, though I've grown to appreciate it over time, I mean, it's above average, but it's nothing on the level that the first two movies are. But if this is the final entry, all I want to see is how they tie up this set of films, regardless of if it's lower quality, like the third film is, in my eyes. Obviously, I hope it's an improvement back to something like the first two entries were, though being realistic, I don't think it will be. It's said to be directed by Michael Chavez, I believe that's how you say his last name, who directed Conjuring Part 3, The Nun 2, The Curse of La Llorona. Yeah, I'm sure you sort of get the vibe of what his movies are like and the quality of them. So like I said, my hopes aren't overly too high, but like I said, if you can put together something that is somewhat entertaining, presumably heartfelt, with this being possibly the last entry in the Conjuring films, and give it the conclusion that I feel like this franchise honestly deserves, because it really has left a mark on modern horror cinema. I'm down to check out this movie, so my number 10 goes to The Conjuring Last Rites. Coming in at my number 9, I have Saw 11, which at this point in time is slated to come out in September, but it was only just this morning that I heard rumours that it might get pushed back again. But like I said, this video is pre-recorded, so by the time you're watching this in January, you probably know when this movie is coming out, so fingers crossed it stays with the 2025 release date. But originally, I wasn't overly excited for this movie. I mean, will I take another Saw film? Sure. But the hype wasn't too high for me going in with Saw 11. I thought Saw X was honestly good. It just fell short of my top 10 horror movies of 2023. I think it was like my number 12 or 13, somewhere around there. And I did like that movie a lot. They simplified the story in terms of the timeline, because if you know the Saw timeline throughout that franchise, it's pretty convoluted and crazy. I like that they simplified it. Give the movie and characters a little bit more heart, and I really liked the structure and the traps. I thought all that was fun. But I was also one to say that I thought too many people kind of sucked that movie off. It was good, but Saw X wasn't that good, you know what I'm saying? There were honestly plot holes in Saw X. The fine tuning wasn't quite there. But I think it was sort of comparing it to the other later installments in the franchise that makes Saw X look so much better. But again, I will say Saw X is the best entry in the franchise since at least the three first entries. But remember, this movie we were meant to get last year, being 2024, got pushed back to 2025, and that was the first thing that gave me so much more faith in Saw 11. They said they pushed it back to fine tune the best story that they could. Good. It shows that they really care. Remember, with Saws 1 to 8, they were coming out yearly, which, you know, was fun. You could go to the movies every October and get a new entry in the franchise. Yeah, that's cool. But you can't deny that from Saws 1 to 8, the further they went on, majority of them sort of dropped in quality. With Saw 11, they've pushed it back to make sure that they don't fuck up the story. We've got the same director returning, who, like I said, he did a good job with Saw X, but now he has a little bit more time to fine-tune what he wants to do with that movie, hopefully make it a little bit better with like less plot holes and, you know, fix up a few loose ends. But otherwise, as I said, I'm more excited for this one compared to how I was earlier on. So my number 9 is Saw 11. Coming in at my number 8, I have The Black Phone 2, which is meant to be coming out sometime around October. I loved the first Black Phone movie. Really good story, acting. Overall, I think it was like my number 5 favourite horror movie of that year. So you would think that this one would probably be a little bit higher on my list, but I'm actually not entirely sure how I feel about this movie yet. Obviously curious, because the first movie was great and I want to see how this one goes. But I kind of feel like the first movie didn't really need a sequel. It's still too early to know much about the plot, though I'm guessing it's probably going to be a prequel, since the first movie ended with the grabber dying. Spoilers for those who haven't seen it. So like I was saying, this one is more of a curiosity rather than excitement, but it's still got some things that give me hope. You know, Scott Derrickson is set to return as director. If it follows the grabber again, which from what I'm hearing it's meant to, because Ethan Hawke is meant to be there again. He's always welcome. I think he's a great actor and he did a great job as the grabber in the first movie. I mean, shit, you know, if it follows the kid from the first movie again, that's alright with me, because he gave one of the best child performances over the past 10 years in my eyes, and I hear no one talk about how good he was in that movie. I thought he was incredible. But I'm just worried this could be a case of a great standalone horror movie that got a sequel just cause. So I'm really hoping I'm wrong there. As I said, it's more of an interest rather than excitement. Again, like the previously mentioned movie, this one was meant to come out in 2024, got pushed back to 2025. Hopefully that's a good sign as well, to fine-tune the story and whatever. But like I said, it's The Black Phone 2. The first movie was great, so hopefully this one follows in its footsteps, coming in at my number 8. Coming in at my number 7, I have Final Destination Bloodlines. This is one of my picks where the release date is still TBA, but it is looking very likely we're going to get it at some point in 2025. Now, this pick on my list just really isn't that deep. It's just simply here because it's a new Final Destination movie. I mean, it's fun watching people be killed in crazy and gory ways trying to escape death. But to be fair, there is a little bit more about it this time around. Apparently, the storyline is death taking out a family's bloodline after a distant relative from the past escaped death. Therefore, the whole family's bloodline needs to be wiped from back then to current time. That genuinely sounds pretty interesting and could give the franchise something fresh. Now, the two directors lined up to take the reins for this movie. This will most likely be their biggest movie to date, so good luck to the both of them. As always, I'm really interested to see the incident that starts the chain reaction. Like, in previous movies, we've had a plane crash, a bridge falling, a roller coaster. We all know the stuff that has happened in the previous movies. I've always wanted to see a starting incident to be something revolving around a boat. Now, if the storyline is what I've heard, presumably it's something, a little bit more old school. The rumours that I have heard about it is that it's relating to a tower falling, and depending on how back in time we go with the curse this time around, it could be a tower falling in, I don't know, Victorian era. I have no clue. But, that sounds pretty interesting too. I will lightheartedly, jokingly say, if the personal pattern continues with this franchise, this entry might not work for me. I say that because I really like the first Final Destination movie. I know a lot of people really like the second one, but for me, it hasn't really ever worked upon rewatch and whatever. But I really like 3, but then the pattern continues with 4 being, I think everyone can agree, the worst entry in the franchise. But then I really like part 5, so if the pattern continues, this next one being part 6 might not work for me. But I really like part 5. Like, part 5 is, like, too good to be a part 5. Like, it is just one of those movies that I feel like a lot of people don't even, like, remember coming out, and I think it's, like, genuinely good. So maybe this one can follow in part 5's footsteps, take some of the positives from that one, and we could get a really fun movie here. But like I said, for my number 7, I have Final Destination Bloodlines. Coming in at my number 6, I have Thanksgiving 2. This is the second one in a row on this list where the release date is still to be announced. But the first Thanksgiving movie didn't reinvent the wheel when it comes to the slasher subgenre. But to be honest, I didn't really give a fuck about that. For those who didn't see the first movie, it's pretty much Scream, but set on Thanksgiving, with a little bit more of an over-the-top approach. And when I spoke about the first movie in my top 10 horror movies of 2023 video, I said that that movie was pretty much destined to be a new slasher franchise. Firstly, we don't have many modern slasher franchises besides Scream, maybe Terrifier. We're meant to have some more Stranger movies come out, so they're pretty much the franchises that we have to work with currently. But especially with the way that the first Thanksgiving movie ended, like, that was like my favorite part of the film. Set up so much potential for a franchise, and I know I'm really ramming home the idea of having a franchise, but I really want this to be a franchise. I don't know what else to say. It could be like what we have with the Halloween franchise, where every Halloween you just watch one of the entries from the series of films and, just have that routine. Where here you could have it like every Thanksgiving, you just watch an entry from the series, or fuck it, just binge the whole franchise as a marathon. Like, look how hyped I am for the potential of having a Thanksgiving franchise. Like, we don't even celebrate Thanksgiving here in Australia, yet I just think the idea sells itself. Give me this franchise. My number 6 is going to the potential release of Thanksgiving 2. And coming in at my number 5, ironically, is Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which is meant to be coming out at the end of the year in December. Reception for the first Five Nights at Freddy's movie was unfortunately mostly negative, especially for casual audiences who didn't really have too much familiarity with the game. And even fans of the game, though they appreciated the lore and Easter eggs that were sort of thrown in there, they weren't overly vibing with it either. A quick background for myself, I'm by all means not a Five Nights at Freddy's super fan or anything like that. I think I've only played the original game and maybe a max of like 5-6 times. Like, that's how little I've played the games and whatever. But for some reason, I kind of actually know a fair amount of the lore and story, which is fucking weird because I actually don't know why. I think I've just found myself in sort of a Five Nights at Freddy's rabbit hole a few times, whether on YouTube or talking to people in person or whatever. But either way, but as someone who is kind of not a true fan, but more aware than like a casual viewer or whatever, I actually thought the first movie was pretty good, like kind of decent. I actually really liked the story, some of the ideas and whatnot were really cool, but the biggest issue with the first movie for myself is that it just wasn't really scary. The attacks were pretty much all off screen. pretty much no gore or anything like that. Like the only form of frights and everything in this movie was pretty much the jump scares, and it had so much potential as well. Like those animatronics alone are pretty intimidating if played right. Like that one scene with Matthew Lillard's character in the golden bunny suit where he's revealed for the first time. I'm not gonna lie, that scene was pretty fucking cool, and it was played fairly well, and it made him like really intimidating. But besides that, the scares weren't really there. If this new movie makes it out to be just as good of a story and develops on what was built in the first one and develops on the characters well, but most of all delivers on the scares and gore, we could have a favourite movie of the year for me in 2025. Now, I did hear feedback that Jason Blum, who was a producer of the first movie, because the first movie was made by Blumhouse, I heard that Jason Blum was aware that people were let down by the lack of horror and gore, and it sounds like he's willing to fix that with the new movie, which is good. I understand that this is a franchise that is better marketed at kids because the target audience for the games was kids, but in the nicest way possible. I mean, fuck them. The kids got a tame version in part 1, so let's bring the balls with part 2. It would have been interesting to see if they were ever going to do a sequel if the first movie didn't make as much money back as what it did. I mean, the animatronic suits alone would have cost a fortune, so would have it been worth it, to have them just sitting in storage somewhere and not make a sequel, if the first one made not that much money back, or do you get them out, just to fucking make your money's worth, with these suits? That would have been interesting. But regardless, and wrapping this one up, the direction of the first movie wasn't an issue. I really liked what the director was doing for the most part. I liked the storyline. There was a lot of elements that I really did like about the first movie that I feel like a lot of people were really harsh on. But with this sequel, they just need to get some balls, let some gory, scary shit happen, and I think we could have a really fun movie there. So my number 5 goes to Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which is, like I said, meant to be coming out at the end of the year. Coming in at my number 4 is the reimagining of Wolfman, which is coming out at the start of the year in January. Now, this is actually a weird one to be making the list, because by the time you're watching this video, Wolfman would have already been out for a couple of days, something like that. But just a reminder that I am pre-recording this video. I'm doing it before 2025 had even started, so regardless of whatever the early reception for the movie is, it's been one I've been looking forward to, so regardless, I'm fine with it making a spot on this list. But another Universal monster movie getting a modernized remake by director Leigh Whannell, who obviously is capable of doing exactly that, and successfully. He did the Invisible Man remake a few years back, and like a lot of other people, I thought that movie was really well done. Made it more modernized, like I said, more grounded rather than fantastical. Gave it a relevant theme of abuse and domestic violence. I just really liked that movie. So if he can do that again with Wolfman, then there is no reason to not be excited for this film. Now, to be fair, for a lot of people, they've sort of become nervous about this movie over the past couple of months. It was actually meant to come out around Halloween last year, but instead got pushed back to a January release date. For those who don't know why being dropped in January is not a good sign, that's normally when studios dump their movies that they feel like aren't going to be too successful or don't have a lot of faith in. But over the past couple of years, especially maybe past 4 or 5, there's been like a consistent number of like really fun hidden gems that pop up in January. So hoping that Wolfman could be the same thing, or maybe it just got pushed back to January just because, and the movie still is actually pretty decent. But another thing that made people kind of hesitant to this movie was a Wolfman costume that got leaked online from a Halloween Horror Nights in one of the Universal Studios in America or whatever, that was promoting the movie last year. I'll attach an image of what the Wolfman was meant to look like, if I remember to do so. But most people's feedback was that they weren't impressed with the design, which is meant to be the Wolfman maybe. To To me, it sort of just looks like a zombified old man a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of this design. We have had some pretty interesting werewolf designs through movies over the years. One that comes to mind that I still think kind of worked, if you've seen the movie Howl, the werewolf movie on a train, the werewolf in that film doesn't look like your typical werewolf. Like if you didn't know the movie was called Howl and the monster didn't do werewolf-like things like howling at the moon and whatever, you wouldn't know that it's meant to be a werewolf. But could be the same thing here. Now, I did hear a rumor about the plot, and again, a reminder, I'm filming this video before the movie has come out, so by the time you're watching it, this movie would have been seen by a majority of you guys, and I could be completely wrong and you guys could be laughing at me, which is fine. But I did hear a plot rumor that because this movie's meant to be more modernized and grounded, instead of a typical werewolf, our lead's going to be bitten by a normal wolf that is infected by this disease, think something along the lines of rabies or whatever, which turns him, again, not into a werewolf, but into this feral, crazed, infectious threat that gives him like wolf-like tendencies, which I think could work, though I would prefer a standard werewolf movie. But we already knew that the storyline and its fundamentals were very different to what the OG movie was. We knew that pretty much right from when this movie got announced. But I don't know, I'm still got a lot of interest for this movie. I'm still pretty excited. Like I said, this movie's already out by the time you're watching this video, so I could be eating my words majorly and you guys could be laughing at me with how many things I got wrong. But I am excited for Leigh Whannell's Wolfman, and that's why it's my number 4. Coming in at my number 3 is a movie called The Bride, which we're meant to be getting sometime around September. Now, this is one that I hear nobody talking about, and it snuck its way to highly anticipated on my list. So this movie is meant to be a quite different reimagining of The Bride of Frankenstein, and it's being directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, who also wrote the movie. It's apparently meant to play more into a drama and romance before the horror elements. But from what I know of what little plot details we've gotten so far, it just sounds so different and interesting, and it's something that I'm really excited to check out. But the thing that really gets me hyped is our two leads in this movie. Christian Bale is meant to play Frankenstein's monster, and I mean, it's Christian Bale, everyone knows how good of an actor he is, and I think he'll do a great job. But to round it out, we have Jessie Buckley playing the title role of the bride, which might not sound like a big name for most people, but I personally fucking love Jessie Buckley. I feel like she is so underrated, extremely talented, and I think she's fucking stunning as well, so I'll add points to that as well. She's been in movies like Beast, Men, that's probably where most people would have seen her face before, and just having those two play our leads in a movie that sounds very different, sounds very unique. It's just one that's sprung really highly onto my most anticipated, though, as I said, I haven't heard too many people talk about it so far, but my number 3 goes to The Bride. For my number 2 is a movie that is a bit of a weird one. It sort of only popped onto people's radars, being announced for a release late in 2024, and we're actually getting it really early in 2025. Here I have a movie called The Monkey, which we're meant to be getting in February. Now, this is a weird one for me to have sort of this high on my list for a few reasons, but firstly I'll cover a few details about the movie, which it's meant to be directed by Oz Perkins, who has become a highly regarded name in horror over the past decade, directing movies like February, better known as Blackcoat's Daughter, Gretel and Hansel, and most recently he did Longlegs from last year. This movie is based off a Stephen King short story. I say that questioningly because I'm not sure if it's a full novel or a short story. But now going back to why this is a weird one to have this high, because firstly, I don't know anything really about the story besides like a one-line description. I'm not aware of the OG Stephen King story, but it's Stephen King, so I'm guessing it's at least somewhat decent. But another reason why is I also haven't really adored any of Osgood Perkins' movies so far. I thought Blackcoat's Daughter was solid. I thought Gretel and Hansel wasn't really that great. But my favourite movie of his 3 films that he's directed so far in the horror genre has been Longlegs for sure. And that's what I'm saying, even though I thought Blackcoat's Daughter and Longlegs were both really solid, none of his movies I've really loved or have been like something that's really hit home for me or like smashed out of the park or anything like that. But his style and his vision is something that I can really appreciate, and it's something that I get really excited for. I'm sure everyone's had that with a director before. You know, you appreciate the style and the look and the feel of their movies, but something other than that just doesn't really click. That's sort of me with Oz Perkins at the moment, but I'm still really excited for The Monkey. I'm hoping that something about this movie just really clicks with me. It's very anticipated on my list, obviously being my number 2, so at my number 2 spot I have The Monkey. And the movie that I have coming in at my number 1 shouldn't be a surprise for anybody, especially if you saw last year's video with my most anticipated horror movies of 2024, where this one technically didn't make the list, but it was an honourable mention. I just included it because we weren't too sure if we were getting it in 2024, but it is looking like we will get it this year. So my number 1 is Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, where the release date still is to be announced, but it's looking very likely that we'll get it in the second half of 2025 on Netflix. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory. It's the timeless, ever enjoyable story of Frankenstein, but also directed by Del Toro, who is like top 3 people that I think could pull this off very well. Dark, gothic, fantastical, with also a lot of heart. You know, that's sort of the fundamentals of what we get from a Del Toro movie. But then on top of that, the cast is incredible. We have Oscar Isaacs, who is meant to be playing Frankenstein, Mia Goth, who is meant to be playing the bride, Jacob Elordi, who has replaced Andrew Garfield as the monster, but so many other great names attached. I mean, Oscar Isaacs alone, you know, just really fucking solid. Mia Goth is like the best actress working in horror at the moment, and Jacob Elordi, representing Australia well. He is a great up-and-coming actor doing great stuff. I do wonder what route Del Toro will go with the story though. A part of me is leaning to thinking that he'll follow the novel and stage play narrative. For those who don't know, it is quite different to the original Universal movie with Boris Karloff. But I can also sort of see him doing this merge between the original OG Frankenstein movie by Universal and The Bride of Frankenstein. And the reason why I say merge is because Mia Goth is meant to be in this movie and she's playing the bride, and obviously the bride wasn't in the original Frankenstein movie, so I can see him sort of doing a merge between the original and the sequel. But as I said, if I have to go with something and place my money on something, I feel like he will follow the original novel narrative, which has been, you know, turned into a stage play as well. I actually recently watched the stage play of Frankenstein, and it was really fucking good. It was so different to the movie, but super enjoyable as well. But all that aside, as I said, we've got a director who I think can smash this out of the park. We've got like a all-star lineup to build up the cast for this movie. I'm just really excited for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. And yeah, that's why it's my number 1 most anticipated horror movie of 2025. So there we go, guys, through my top 10 list of most anticipated horror movies of 2025. Like I said, some of them, the information could be a little bit off, and I'm just talking shit because this video is pre-recorded, but I could be wrong. You guys will be laughing at me, that's fine, but honestly, they're the 10 movies that I'm probably most looking forward to. Like always, there'll be movies that just pop up out of nowhere and they end up being really good, and you'll be like, how come that one wasn't most anticipated? At this point in time, I didn't even know that movie existed, so keep that in mind, guys. And also keep in mind, this is my top 10 most anticipated, so if there's other movies that you're looking forward to, feel free to let me know in the comments below what movies they are. But otherwise, again, thank you for joining me for this list, guys, and I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.